Greetings to everyone who's ever trusted or been trusted. This is Proof of Pod, episode 11. My guest today is the explainer-in-chief of cryptocurrency, Omid Malekan. Omid, are you there?
Yes, I am, and happy to be here, David.
Fantastic. Professor Omid.
That is what some of my students call me.
All right. So, first of all, let me start with this. I understand that you went out with my girlfriend. What's up with that?
I had coffee with your girlfriend on several occasions, purely friendly coffee,
Okay.
which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Um, just because both of her parents have been, when I was much younger, they were wonderful mentors to me.
Mhm.
Her dad actually was very instrumental in me starting my first career in finance. And then since then in adulthood, they've just been good friends to me. So I'm so happy that now you and I get to sort of close the circle by talking about crypto.
Yeah. So my understanding is my now girlfriend, she wasn't my girlfriend then, kind of set you guys up on almost like a blind date.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
And
Yeah.
now she's set us up on a blind date. So
Yeah.
it all comes full circle. All right. So I was looking at your website, your media kit. I gotta say, it's a little intimidating. I'm almost like discouraged. I'm like, wow, this guy, he's the explainer in chief of crypto, has written two books, Adjunct Professor at Columbia Business School, 3.5 years as the in-house crypto expert for Citi Ventures and Citibank, made viral videos such as the Bernanke. I love this. I love this. I've seen this in a few places. I think in at least one of your books and on your website, you spent years being confused about crypto, so the rest of us don't have to be. You do speaking engagements, you consult with companies. Like, I feel like, I've got so much catching up to do when I read all about this.
Oh, well, thank you. But actually, one of my favorite things about crypto is that whatever past credentials anybody has are not all that relevant.
Right.
It is very much still a meritocracy and just an amazing kitchen where we cook up all sorts of new and interesting ideas, and all are welcome. And like with everything else, there are actually some disadvantages that go with being in it a long time.
Mm.
Makes it a little harder to learn the newest and the latest.
What percentage of your work life is devoted to cryptocurrency?
All of it.
Most people, I feel like, don't get to devote 100% of their work to crypto. Do you find that to be true as well?
Yeah,
A lot
I
of
am
people who are,
very right. I mean, I'm just lucky because the one benefit of having been around it as long as I have is that I've gotten to build enough relationships and credibility where I could have enough opportunity.
yeah,
But I mean, the other nice thing is that crypto as a ecosystem or as a industry, however you want to think of it, or as a community, it just keeps growing.
yeah,
And there's always more and more opportunity for people to do what I do, for people to do what you do, for people to start their own project, for people to invest in it, so forth and so on.
yeah. That's great. That's one of the things I really want to talk to you about. But let me ask you a few more questions about like your journey. So, what's your education?
I have an undergraduate degree that I actually got from Columbia where I teach now, but a long, long time ago.
How do you get to be a professor with an undergraduate degree?
That's a great question. It's the trick is find a brand new field where
Right,
nobody has any
right.
credentials, where there are no degrees in it, and nobody can even claim like, oh, well, I've been teaching this for the last 15 years because when I started, the industry was like 7 years old,
Oh, that's amazing.
and then show up. This is actually a piece of advice I give my students in the last class of the semester that if someone has tolerance for some risk and volatility in their professional career, then I highly recommend whatever you're interested in doing, trying to do it in an emerging field or area, because it's going to be, like I said before, a lot more of a meritocracy.
Right,
Like if you want to go into finance today, right? It's so structured and
right.
hierarchical, and there are very, very, very fixed paths to success.
You got to have the right degree from the right school.
All that right relationship, start your
Uh-huh.
job at the right firm,
Hmm.
Have the right mentor. Then there's like there's the path, and then there's even the pacing of the path. So like, oh yeah, you work for a couple of years, then you go to business school, then you come back, blah blah blah.
Right.
The great thing about crypto is none of that exists. It's literally just the whole industry is made up of mostly people who just showed up and put in the time and the work.
Yeah. Hey, that's me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. Like even your sabbaticals are planned out, it sounds like in business school. I heard something kind of similar like with law school where it's just like if you don't like, have your pre-grad and then like a certain type of job and then your grad, law degree and then like the certain kind of internship and like from that internship you get hired. It's like you're derailed and you're in trouble. Like your career could be in jeopardy.
Yeah. Or you just don't pass the bar exam.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, I learned somewhat through experience that I don't do well when that's the name of the game.
Mm,
I am much happier in a field where you get to sort of just make your own path.
yes, yeah.
It's not always easy. I've had to go long periods without any income, for example. Um, you have to do a lot of
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at me. Go ahead.
But I can attest to the fact that if you stick to it and you're disciplined and you just always focus on doing whatever it is that you're best at. So that was the other part of like I learned throughout my journey that I am not meant to be a trader or an active investor of any kind, even like a venture capital investor. It's just not. I tried before crypto. That's what I did professionally, but I wasn't very good at it. I'm also not meant to be an entrepreneur. People have always asked me, like, why don't you start your own project, company, something? It's not my calling.
Yeah.
What I'm good at is the teaching and explaining and communicating. And I'm fortunate that I've been able to make a career out of that.
Sounds like a perfect guest for this show. Just personally, like, I just find that like I'm just the kind of person that can't do something that they're bored by. I just even if it seems like I could be good at it, I'm not because I'm bored by it, and I just have this high amount of curiosity that I just need to be in something that excites me.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. And it's funny, like, it's not money in the sense that a lot of my friends and peers, they're very successful now in some business or financial position and financially they've done very well for themselves, but it's just that would not give me much fulfillment if
Yeah.
I'd much rather trade that for the excitement of both doing something that I like, of getting to be curious and learning, and also it's unpredictable, right? Like the average person, whatever their corporate gig is, it's pretty predictable what the next day looks like. Possibly because they have 8 Zoom meetings on their calendar. That's not for me.
Oh, this is even more exciting than I thought then. So you're a self-made professor. I assumed that you had a PhD in something.
No, nothing. I don't I teach grad school, but I don't have a graduate degree myself. Not that I have anything against it. But it just so happened that at a particular place and time, which is my school 5 years ago, they were willing to entertain offering a class, just an introductory class on blockchain and cryptocurrency. And then I also met a wonderful, very successful tenured professor who was willing to take me on as a co-instructor
Nice.
and teach me a lot about the act of teaching, which I didn't have any experience in at that point in time.
Hmm.
And here we are today.
Wow, that's cool. So at the most basic level, what about somebody who's like just getting into crypto? What what should they read? What should they do? I will say that it seems like the story of the blockchain is an excellent place to start.
With the caveat that it's now what it came out 6 years ago,
Yeah,
and
I have written here it was published in 2018.
yes, which means I wrote it like I finished writing it in 2017, which means some of what's in it is very, very dated.
Yeah.
I cringe to think. I know at the in the back of it, I had like an appendix where I wrote a little summary of some of the other crypto projects. It's almost entirely about Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I wrote about some other projects. And there were things. Let's just say there were projects I took seriously then that I do not now. So as much as I'm proud of the two books that I've written, and I'm happy to recommend either one as a starting point, I do generally admonish people that you can't rely too much on books for this topic because it just changed so fast. So my books are a little different because they were written to be foundational. And with my second book, Re-Architecting Trust, I actually went out of my way not to make it too much about whatever was happening when I wrote that 3 years ago. But nevertheless, most of the ideas in crypto are being developed almost in real time in places like social media, blogs, certainly podcasts such as this.
Uh-huh.
So I think
Oh,
I highly
thank you.
recommend those kinds of primary sources. But the
Hmm.
other thing is people should use it. This has been my standing suggestion to anybody that wants to learn about crypto for a decade now, which is like just get $10 or $50 of some coin, not to invest,
Hmm.
but to play.
Hmm.
And this partly has to do with my sort of personal genesis story was that I had a friend who sort of forced me to help her buy a little bit of Bitcoin
Hmm.
back in 2013 or 2014.
Hmm.
And I had no interest at that time point in time. If you ask my opinion of it, I would, what a lot of the skeptics say today is like, oh, some stupid internet money that only drug dealers use.
Right.
But it
Were
was
you a
the
day
action.
trader at that time?
I was out of trading by then. But that the fact that I did have experience with what we call TradFi or traditional finance and crypto allowed me to really appreciate when I did my first on-chain transactions, how different it was. I couldn't communicate any of it. I had no idea what I was doing. I'm not a technical person.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about cryptography at that point in time. I literally, I think, like Googled like how do you send Bitcoin and followed some tutorial.
Right.
Um, but it was the using. And the nice thing now, as opposed to 10 years ago, is there's so much more to do.
Hmm.
So whether it's you want to just try storing and transacting some Bitcoin, or you want to go use a different blockchain, if you want to play around with sending tokens or creating tokens or owning an NFT or using decentralized finance. I highly recommend everybody, if they're not sure what to do, just try some of these things. And you won't know what you're doing, and it'll be confusing and scary. And that's why you shouldn't do it with anything more than like the amount of money you'd be willing to
Yeah.
lose.
Right.
But the using will help guide the learning. So you'll do something and be like, all right, whatever. I set up a wallet. That doesn't interest me. But oh, I actually used Uniswap to trade one coin for another or decentralized finance. And that really resonated with me. Or like I love the idea of NFTs. How do I go to a service like an OpenSea and create my own NFT and send it to my buddy as a joke?
Hmm.
And then by doing, people will find, okay, this is what I'm interested in. This is where I want to focus my energy, so forth and so on.
Wow. This is really interesting. So glad we've got you on the program. Well, I hate to say this because it makes me sound uh, it's like heretical. It's like almost anti-intellectual or whatever. But I think books are a little overrated. Is that crazy?
No, well, fiction is not overrated. I think everybody should read good quality fiction, contemporary, ancient, whatever, and a lot of it. I actually feel like almost everything I learn from fiction,
Uh,
literature. I agree with you about most nonfiction, which is ironic because I only write nonfiction, but I think most nonfiction books could be condensed to like a 20-page pamphlet. Problem is you can't charge $30 for a 20-page pamphlet. So you get these very formulaic books. But certainly in our world of a rapidly evolving ecosystem and technology, I would agree that books are overrated.
right. It's like when I got into crypto in 2014, there weren't a lot of books, if any. I'm not even sure there was one, to be honest. So I learned, like from podcasts and from articles and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, the books, I only say that they're overrated, not that they're bad and have no use, certainly. Your book, like you go through like really step by step a lot of the core features of cryptocurrency. You have a beautiful like glossary at the end, like a lot of the terms, which I think is a big part where people get lost or caught up? You know, is there's all this terminology, it's like speaking a different language. And if the person who's hearing the words doesn't understand those terms, then they can't keep up.
Yeah, and that's actually a good reminder for those of us on the inside that everything is very jargony, but maybe it doesn't need to be. Because I do know from friends and students that the jargon is often intimidating to newcomers. But yeah, actually, ironically, I'm remembering now the impetus for writing the first book, that story of the blockchain book, was because I looked around and there were not very many, if any, crypto books that were not technical
Hmm.
and not ideological.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of books about like how does a blockchain work and the deep technicals of Bitcoin mining or something. A lot of books about hard money and the ethos of decentralization.
Yeah.
So what I tried to do with that book was write something that appeals to an audience that's not interested in learning something technical or being preached to. They just
Right.
want an answer to the basic question: what is Bitcoin? What is blockchain? What's Ethereum? What is mining, etc.
Right.
So I try to write a book that an intelligent adult could read in an afternoon or two and have a basic idea of those things. And I'm guessing that part of the book still holds up.
So we kind of got led here. I don't want to get too deep into it, but you kind of mentioned like, the philosophy or whatever. Um, and your second book, which came out just a couple of years ago, Re-Architecting Trust. This is a lot more just kind of like platonic ideal of like trust and like, money and all that kind of stuff. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah. You can summarize it as the first book was my attempt at simply and quickly answering the question, what is it? And then the second book is a much more in-depth attempt to answer the question, why do we need it? Particularly in the context of history. So the second book is actually what I guess is unique about it is most of what's in it is not about crypto. It's about the history of money, banking, payments, even like technology platforms. Why are they the way they are today? How did they get to this point? What purpose do they serve? The answer to which almost always to build trust in some kind of a human interaction.
Mhm.
And then lastly, why do I think crypto is the inevitable evolution of how we build trust, particularly in a increasingly digital society?
I saw early in the book you reference *Sapiens*, which is a book that got me, thinking about some things in a new way. And I think this is a book that also, can really get you thinking about, trust and money in new ways. Something that I love about your approach is you're always just saying like the most famous philosopher in the world of all time,
Socrates.
Socrates. So like, Socrates like says like true wisdom is knowing you know nothing, something like this.
Yeah, that's a
And
good line.
like the more that I think about crypto and money and all this stuff, the more I realize like even though every person walking around thinks they know what money is, they really don't on like a deep level understand what money is, and it's a very hard thing to wrap your mind around.
I agree. And it's still hard for me. One of the interesting things I learned when I was doing the research for teaching or writing, money is one of those subjects that you can spend years and years studying. And you think you have a mental model of exactly what it is, and then you find some historical example that breaks it. So, because it is a social technology, and at the end of the day, anything that's social is always going to be messy and amorphous and always changing throughout time. So I really take issue with either diehard pro crypto people or anti crypto people when they come at it from the place of, well, this is what money is.
Hmm.
Because whatever you think it is, there's probably been some place, sometime in human history where it wasn't that, and it was still money and very important.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. Like we try to like, categorize things and, break them down in different types or, ratings or whatever. And that helps us understand it, but it doesn't define what the thing is. Money is as money does, I said on one of my previous interviews.
That's great. I like that. I might quote you on that
Okay.
just because my tongue-in-cheek answer is when people say, what is money? I say, what is art?
Uh-huh.
Because
Sure.
nobody
Yeah.
can say
Great
what is
question.
art. And a lot of times, whatever one group or generation thinks is definitely not art, then becomes the thing that the next group or generation believes is absolutely art.
Uh-huh.
So I think maybe crypto goes through a similar process where you have all these people that are like, Bitcoin can never be money. And then maybe there's a younger generation that's like, no, Bitcoin is actually the ideal form of money for the world we have today.
All right, so to try and close this out, what type of person should read Re-Architecting Trust?
If somebody wants a much more in-depth and almost philosophical understanding for why blockchain and cryptocurrency and decentralization is the inevitable path forward for different parts of our society.
Yeah, great. I mean, a lot of people ask me the question like, why does Bitcoin have any value or whatever? I guess now that I'm talking to you and thinking about it, a question to them should be like, have you ever given any thought to the question? You know, have you ever read the book by Professor Omid Malekan where he you know, maybe addresses these topics?
Yeah, please do. I'm actually in the process of writing. I have a friend who is a senior researcher at a major global central bank, and he's very kind, very open-minded, just doesn't believe in Bitcoin. And he's working on a paper on why Bitcoin has no value.
Hmm.
And I'm working on a rebuttal for why he's wrong.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons I love being in the world of ideas and the Socratic method of this is that he makes his case and I make my case and we both learn from each other.
Right.
But the other great thing about crypto is that no one ever thought about the question of what is money or what is the ideal kind of money for the world that we live in today or the world we're headed to.
Yeah.
Um, because like there was no choice. My co-instructor, the guy who brought me into Colombia, he tells this great story that he heard about Bitcoin, and he's a economist, has a PhD, tenured professor, been teaching for over 30 years. And he says, well, I said, okay, well, fine. For me to understand Bitcoin, I need to study money because I've never studied money. Let me go look up what the literature says. Like, what are the papers, the textbooks? And he said, I realized there's almost nothing because
Right.
until recently, like these questions of what is money and how do we design it is not something that economists grappled with because like you couldn't just design a new currency and have it be global and accessible, but now you can. So I really do enjoy this process by which whatever one thinks of, say, Bitcoin, its very existence and the fact that it's survived for as long as it has forces people to grapple with these fundamental topics.
Yeah, and something that's really interesting, and you address this right away, is you don't even have to believe in Bitcoin to accept Bitcoin because you know that somebody else believes in it.
Yeah, I think it's like we do this exercise in my class where it's like you tell a student like if I gave you a blue dollar bill that's identical to a green one in every way except it's blue, would you accept it? And without thinking, I would say no. And
Right.
I say, why? And then they have to think about it. And they say, well, because nobody else would have let me pay them with it.
Very good.
So it's like the ultimate proof that money is just a social invention and that a cryptocurrency could very much fulfill that role. Um, and then if it gets widespread adoption, it makes no difference if people believe in its quote unquote value. If they can use it in their regular life, then they will.
So great. You got these two books kind of aimed at two different levels of, you know, the crypto experience. Let's return to like a hypothetical person. Let's say this person wants to have a career in cryptocurrency. Do you have any like tips or ideas? You touched on it a little bit, but
Sure. Going back to the fact that there are no established credentials, then it's like, how do you get yourself recognized by somebody?
hmm,
And couple of easy pointers. One, contribute. There are many different ways to contribute. There are people, if you are a more on the technical programming side, code something, write something, deploy something. Um, you can do that on your own, or because a lot of crypto projects are decentralized, there are these communities, sometimes they're organized, sometimes they're not, of people who actually contribute technically to it. just show up and join it. A lot of times you can just go on Twitter or in the Discord or the Telegram group for the project and say, hey, I want to help out here. What can I do? And just the work will speak for itself. If you're not technical, there's still plenty that you can do. You can write, you can participate in governance. You can just participate in the discussions about how to advance something, how to think about something, how to communicate something. A fairly common story I know of people who currently work in crypto, gainfully employed, doing something that they enjoy, is that it began with them just finding a project appealing, informally joining its community, and then contributing to the discussion about it. And then one day getting a DM from an entrepreneur or somebody else involved with the project that said, hey, we like how you think and we like your ideas. Who are you? What do you do? Do you want to come maybe join us formally? Um, and then the last bit is be a little bit aggressive. Sometimes it's a question of there's a something you want to be involved in or a project that you really believe in. Well, just reach out to its leaders. Crypto is still a fairly small community, and it very much has what we call the wagamy or we are all going to make it mentality, where while it's kind of interesting, there's a lot of tribalism on the one hand, as you know, between different projects and different
Yeah, yeah,
coins. But
sure.
on the other hand, because anybody who's in crypto kind of is doing it because they expect this to be a growing field, there's not a lot of like one-on-one competition where somebody feels like, oh, I don't want to help some junior person, or I don't want, somebody just DM me on Twitter. I don't know who they are. I don't want to help them.
Hmm.
There's usually the opposite, that people go out of their way to help, particularly if it's new people, young people who are eager and want to get involved. But they're not going to know how to do that if you don't take the first step of sending them an email or pinging them on Twitter.
Yeah, when I got started, there were these like what are they called, faucets or something, where you could just go and people would just like give you a little Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's still
Oh,
like,
that's great.
yeah.
That's
Now there's
definitely
like
your,
airdrops and stuff, but it seems to be like the more airdrop stuff is almost always a scam, seems to me, but maybe not. I don't know.
yeah, it's either a scam or if it's not a scam, a lot of times the problem is there are these industrial operations now that farm the airdrops, which kind of call into question why you do them in the first place. But
Yeah.
um, that's great about the faucets. That's definitely one of those like at some point when you're older, you'd be like, in my day, people
Yeah,
would
back in
just
my
give
day.
away Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
but even I used to have a policy. I'm just too busy now, but I used to tell friends, family, whoever wanted, I was like, if you're willing to go through the trouble of setting up a wallet the right way, I will send you $5 worth of Bitcoin for you to play with.
Right. That was another thing, like PayPal. That's how PayPal got started, right? You
Oh,
just
that's
started
true.
an
Yeah.
account, you get $5. All
But the
right.
difference is, and this actually, it's a great point because I think this speaks to the fun, organic nature of crypto. PayPal was a corporation that raised venture money and then just decided to use some of it to pay people to open an account.
Uh-huh.
What so often happens in our world is you just have individuals doing it philanthropically.
And like a couple guys that were on the show come to mind as people who like. So Seb Bunny was one of the guys I interviewed. He's a Bitcoin educator now, and he started off as like a mountain bike instructor. It's so new that you don't have to compete on credentials. You don't have to have the right degrees, at least for now in the crypto world, right?
Yeah. And I actually know of specific examples where people help what in any other context would be seen as a competitor succeed because it's almost never I as an individual, my success can only come at this other person's expense in crypto. It's almost always we as a community. It's like us against the world.
Hmm.
And we want to take over the world because we think we can make it a better world.
Hmm.
But we have to work together and constantly bring in more and more people into the crypto tent to achieve that.
Yeah. While we're on this, some people ask me, like, are you scared of uh, central bank digital currencies? What would you say to somebody like that? Do you think it's a threat to Bitcoin?
I think they might be, depending on how they're designed, the threat to society. But if that version of a CBDC comes true, then I think it is the ultimate driver for Bitcoin, because in that world, a CBDC will represent the dystopian version of
Mhm.
what digital money could look like, supply that is centrally controlled down to the fraction of a cent every second,
Mhm.
um, like a authoritarian state like monitoring,
Mhm.
just using money to control people by doing things like having smart contracts that control how and when you can spend your money.
Mhm.
If that ever comes true, then it will be the ultimate advertising for a completely decentralized, fully transparent,
Mhm.
non-sovereign currency like Bitcoin.
Mhm.
All that said, I will say, as someone who has spent many years on this topic, there's no liberal society that's like even has that on their radar today. Maybe it'll change someday.
Mhm.
Certainly, more authoritarian places like China, which already controls every aspect of people's lives and money, they're moving ahead, although even their project hasn't actually taken up much adoption. So I would caution against thinking that something like a digital dollar issued by the Fed is inevitable. It's not. And partly because a CBDC would have such a profound impact on every part of society. I mean, forget Bitcoin, what it would do to like commercial banking, for example, would be a radical transformation. And most governments are not in the business of radical transformation.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page for sure there. I also wanted to shout out another interview we did with Max Hillebrand, he was like an economist, like a traditional, Keynesian economist, and wound up, being the main guy behind Wasabi Wallet, despite having no idea how to code. So really a cool space where, you can carve your own niche.
That is true. I am not one of those people, but I'm always impressed and inspired by people like that who just out of sheer will and passion create something that ends up being very useful to all sorts of other people.
It seems to me like you're doing okay.
I'm doing okay in my neck of the woods. And I like to think of myself as the person who might potentially educate and inspire the next generation of builders and creators.
I'm getting inspired right now. All right, let's say we've got another hypothetical person. Let's say this person spent a couple decades in IT. He's got a huge amount of interest and curiosity in economics, history, Bitcoin, crypto. He's got maybe a flawless skin and an epic beard. Like, how should this person like get, transition into, being full-time, actually making money in crypto?
If you have that kind of technical skill set, and maybe you pick up one or two additional technical toolkits, like you spend a little bit of time learning about for different kinds of cryptography that we use in the industry.
Mhm.
Um, but then I think you can actually go and get a really good high paying job,
Mhm.
because there's always demand for people that have various technical backgrounds and skills that they
Mhm.
can put to work. And it's important to remember, I get this question all the time. No one expects you to have direct experience in cryptocurrency because it
Right.
doesn't exist. There's just so few people that can say like, oh, I've spent, decades as a cybersecurity expert or a programmer or an engineer, and I've been working on the smart contracts or wallets or something for the last 8 years. So when crypto projects or companies are hiring, they are keenly aware of the fact that if they limit themselves to people who actually know how to write, like something like a Wasabi wallet, then it's just you're not going to get a lot of candidates. And if you do, they're going to ask for a lot of money. So the two things that they look for is one, that you have proficiency in some area that is useful, and then two, that you have a passion for applying it to this world.
Right.
If you have those two things, I think you will be surprised how many job opportunities you might be able to find.
All right. Here's another hypothetical person. What about somebody who doesn't care at all about crypto? Should they, or does it not matter?
I think everybody should. at least pay attention to it at this point in time. I'm careful never to tell someone like you better learn about crypto because just human nature being what it is, you and I have both been in that position where somebody tells us we better do something or learn about something, and just for that reason alone, we decide not to do it just to spite them. But when I meet people like that, I reframe the conversation and I try to encourage them to think about what's happening in the world today and forget crypto. Just take some of the um, trends and project them forward. Right. So I tell them, like, think about how much of our lives now are online and our interactions are controlled by some kind of a tech platform. It could be a social media platform, could be a rideshare platform, could be an online dating site. And then just think about, do you have any control? No. Is there any transparency? No. Do you know what the algorithms that so much dictate literally how your day goes today? Do you have the remotest clue how they're working? No. Have you read the interesting arguments, articles, congressional inquiries as to how a lot of these algorithms, actually what they're doing is terrible and destructive because they're trying to prey on our worst tendencies because that's how they get engagement. Yes, these are universal concepts that everyone I speak to, they're like, oh yeah, I'm totally with you on that.
Right.
And I say, okay, you don't believe in crypto. Then what's your solution? And to be fair, crypto has yet to deliver a solution to almost any of these problems. I think Bitcoin has succeeded as being a decentralized, scarce, and completely apolitical form of money. We've got that. Most people who live in the West today don't need that. I don't need that today. You don't need that today. Doesn't mean they might need it someday in the future, but we're not at a point where I can say like blockchain, crypto, decentralization has solved the problems of tech platforms or social media.
Right.
But at least we're trying. And even though most of what we've tried so far has not succeeded, at least we show up and say there has got to be a better way.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a great analogy, but somebody was asking me about it. They were like, I'm never going to invest in crypto, so why should I learn anything about it? I was like, it's kind of like saying like I'm never going to drive a motorcycle, so I shouldn't learn about, like road safety, sharing up the road with a motorcycle, right? Like, it's going to impact you in some way or another. The fact that it has been, I would say, like wildly successful to date, and in my opinion, going to continue to be even more successful. Like, what's behind that? Like, can you try to just like grasp the forces that are pushing other people into crypto, even if it's not for you?
I think that's a good argument. But I think we should acknowledge that I am somewhat sympathetic to the person who says, I'm never going to invest in it, because that
Yeah,
is usually a response to the people who believe in crypto, who unfortunately just try to badger everybody else into investing in it.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, there's the cringier side of the industry that's like, oh yeah, good luck staying poor, and the dollar is going to collapse to zero tomorrow,
Uh-huh.
and that's incorrect, but it's also just not a very compelling argument. Which is why I've gone out of my way to this day. I actually often try to talk people out of investing too much in crypto. I
Right.
remind people that, look, it's a very volatile thing.
Hmm.
And whereas like I'm convinced that Bitcoin and ETH and maybe one or two other things are here to stay, they could fall in half in price tomorrow because they've done that before. And I don't think they've
Yeah.
been short enough where we're out of the woods. And ironically, again, human nature being what it is, if you have that kind of conversation with people, then they're like, oh, you know what? That's sensible. Maybe I should learn a little bit more about it.
Are you much of a sports fan?
I'm a big sports fan. I'm a little tired today because I went to Monday Night Football last night in New Jersey
Ah.
to watch my pathetic New York Jets lose to the Buffalo Bills.
Oh. I'm an hour outside of Buffalo, so
Oh, are you a Bills fan?
yeah, they're my second team. I'm from Chicago, so they're number one in my heart. But
Okay, well, Bears on the rise.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I last night coming home, it's like it's cold. It's like midnight. I'm like, got to take 4 trains to get back. I was like, why am I a Jets fan? Like, really? Why? But
Yeah,
why do you
question
ask?
everything.
Yeah.
Well, I have a pet peeve about people who only think of crypto as like the casino, like invest in this, trade this, like
Hmm.
you're, what are your trades? I'm like, I don't trade crypto, but I've become more sympathetic to these people since I've gotten on like more social media, and I realized that like the loudest voices are just like touting crypto, this crypto, that crypto, trading systems, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, why wouldn't you think crypto is all about this? But I tie it to sports because I think it's something viewer might have more experience with, which is sports betting. Cross state line betting is now legal and all this stuff. And so like every sports event is flooded with commercials for like betting on sports. So I wonder like, if somebody who is just getting into sports now would think, oh, like sports is all about betting, just like a
Huh.
lot of people think crypto
Yeah.
is all about betting.
I think that's a great analogy because it's true. I actually, as a big sports fan, I'm sort of grossed out by the amount of gambling and advertising around gambling. I think it's fine. I think it should be legal. I think adults have a right to do with their hard-earned money whatever they wish.
Sure.
But it's not for me. And people might be surprised how like just what 5 years ago all the pro sports leagues were vehemently opposed to
Yeah.
gambling of any kind because they thought they would corrupt their sport. And now, like, not only do they have official sponsorships, but they're all moving teams to Las Vegas to be
Yeah.
closer to the
Yeah.
action.
Yeah. It's the answer to all your questions is money. You know, like you're totally right. Like when I grew up, if they were to refer to like the point spread or who was the favorite or whatever, they would do it in very oblique terms.
Hmm.
you know and now like because there's a lot of money in it and there's tons of advertising to be had, and they're just like, hey, let's just get in on it. And virtually every show now that talks about sports also references, the betting lines, not just because of betting but because it's like the best way that humans have come up with to predict things, right? Is like betting markets.
Yeah, prediction markets, betting markets. And as a markets person, I really do appreciate that part of it. Like I do love markets as a living, breathing thing to pay attention to and learn
Yeah.
from. This is actually part of this love is something I learned through osmosis from your girlfriend's father. Because he's
It's
always had
Victor
that.
Niederhoffer, by the way.
Victor Niederhoffer, who I still think his first book, The Education of a Speculator, is one of the best things that I've ever read when it comes to money, finance,
Hmm.
life. I actually just not that long ago when there was a situation with market selling off because of the yen carry trade unwind. I went and looked up the beginning of that book where Vic's talking about it's like I'm an old man and I trade the yen. It's just so beautifully written. So I think markets are great. I also think counterintuitively, while I don't think people should actively trade crypto, I think it's beneficial to pay attention to what the different prices are doing and to look at like, okay, why is Bitcoin going up while other things are going down? Why is this coin even within the crypto world? Like, why did these coins go up this week and these other coins went down? Because it's information.
Hmm.
And like one thing I tell my students, because they often ask me questions similar to what you get asked, which was like, how do we know what to look at? And I tell them, sometimes what I do is I'll go to one of these websites that has all the coin prices, like CoinGecko, CoinMarketCap, and I just
Yeah.
rank the prices in terms of what's been going up the most or down the most in the last week.
Hmm.
And then I use that to guide my own journey. Say, okay,
Hmm.
why are these coins going up? What's happening here? Oh, well, there's a narrative that the future of crypto and AI together is bright and there
Right.
are projects that are going to cater. Okay, that's interesting. Do I believe in that? What are these projects?
Yeah.
All right. Or alternatively, like recently, it's been a lot like, oh, these meme coins are going up. Okay, but why? Like, what does it mean? Why do people like meme coins? Why don't they like other coins? Why haven't tokenized real estate taken off? And instead, people are buying like the 18th dog coin. So, markets as a signaling mechanism, to your point about sports
Can
and
I
gambling.
use that as a title for if I create a new meme coin? 18th dog coin? That'd be great.
18th, well, but I actually had a conversation with people about this a couple of days ago that it's possible that dog coins are dated and cat coins are on the rise.
Right.
I will leave it up to your audience to decipher what that means because I have no idea. But
Yeah. Well, since we're talking about education of a speculator, there's a line at the beginning also of that book that like stuck with me and is super relevant in this time when I'm being bombarded all the time by touts, we would call them, like
Mm.
trading experts. He said, Victor said in the book, he's never known anybody who would give away their secret of how to make money for the price of a book.
That's great. I mean, I also I think that's actually the way. Before I knew anything about Victor, I was in a bookstore going through the business finance books. I stumble on EdSpec. I pull it out, and I think one of the first things as an introduction is like, "This book will not make you rich," or something like that. And I was like,
Right.
"Yeah, okay, this is the kind of business book I want to be reading."
Yeah.
I've also learned, like working in places like Wall Street and finance, that you know how there are the people that are constantly on TV talking about how to trade and make money.
Mhm.
Those are not the people who know how to make money. Because if like
Uh,
you know how to trade and make money, you don't have time to go on TV every day.
for sure, 100%. Let me ask you this. How does someone become the explainer in chief of crypto? Is there a contest? Is it like a lottery system?
No, it's you invent a title,
Uh,
and then you hope that nobody else shows up trying
uh,
to claim it, which has both have been true for me. It was just a made up tongue-in-cheek
yeah,
um, term. But I this goes back to my point of figuring out what you're good at. I
yeah.
learned by accident that perhaps my greatest ability is to take something very complicated, understand it, and then break it down and explain it in a way that other people could understand it.
Mhm.
Thus, that title. I think the main reason no one has challenged me for it is it's not necessarily the kind of title most people want. Like the explainer in chief is definitely not the richest person, nor the most powerful person, nor the most famous person, but it happens to be who I am, and I'm quite content with that.
Yeah. You're like the CEO of Bitcoin, the chief explanation officer.
Yeah, what was that great Jamie Dimon quote? That the one day Satoshi is going to show up and start printing Bitcoins again.
Oh, yeah. What you're saying, though, it reminds me of another great line from Sherlock Holmes, where he says something like, I'm a consulting detective because I never wanted to do anything else in my life, and there was no job that like fit what I wanted to do, so I just invented it.
That's great. Yeah, and look, in our world, you can, and there are probably many more jobs to be invented yet as crypto continues to grow.
Yeah, because like people might think he worked for Scotland Yard or whatever. No, he didn't. He was just like what we'd call more like a private investigator now.
Yeah, I never thought about that. That's pretty cool.
Let me hit you up with Medley's test of Bitcoin maximalism.
Okay.
I'm Medley, by the way. All right, so your uncle wants to give you some money out of his estate, and he makes you an offer. You have one of two choices. Choice number one, he will give you $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, and you have to hold this Bitcoin for 10 years in trust, and then you can do whatever you want with it. Choice number two, he'll put $100,000 into altcoin ETF, and you have to hold that also for 10 years, and then you can, do whatever you want with it from that point. And the ETF is something where you don't get to choose what altcoins are chosen, but you feel like it's fairly well run. They're making reasonable choices. So you get X $1,000 worth of this altcoin ETF. What is X where you feel like it's a pretty close choice? So if you feel Bitcoin and altcoins are kind of on equal terms, over a 10-year period, your answer is 100. If you feel like Bitcoin is better than altcoins for this purpose, then your answer is going to be over 100. And if you feel like altcoins have more upside than Bitcoin, your answer will be under 100.
It's not one altcoin. It's just like a basket of prominent altcoins today.
Correct. It's a basket. So in all likelihood, like ETH is probably the highest weighted one because that's, the biggest market cap and whatever. But there's a
Yeah.
bunch of, ones that might fail, might succeed. Who knows?
I'm just making this up off the top of my head, but I would have to get more in the altcoins.
That
If
also
you
could be a really great title for the name of the show. I'm just making this up off the top of my head. I
No,
like
I love this. This is very provocative, actually. Because you're forcing me to put numbers on it. This is the whole theory behind betting markets and election markets, right?
Right,
That people's opinions are a lot more useful to society if they have to put actually dollars behind it.
right.
Um,
So efficient markets theorem says exactly 100. They're both the same, right?
yeah,
Because
I
all the
would,
information has already been processed into the price.
yeah, I think that's been one of the most like thoroughly debunked financial hypotheses ever. I think I would have to get 150 to 200,000 for the altcoins, compared to 100 for Bitcoin. The reason being, well, if you want me to explain the reason
Please,
being,
please, please do, Professor.
Bitcoin has clearly made it and it's here to stay, and nothing will ever compete with it.
Hmm.
That I'm confident of. Um, it is as decentralized as I think a cryptocurrency will ever be. It is a widely respected, owned mining. The hash rate is very high and it's healthy. I think there will only ever be room for one proof of work coin, not many. And the just the weird kinks and nuances of history, like the fact that we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is or was, I
Yeah,
think just helps it with that like founding mythology, because money
yeah,
is a myth, and I do think Bitcoin's money, and every myth needs a great origin story, and Bitcoin has this amazing one, which is why to this day we just had this HBO documentary that claimed to
yeah.
unveil who's, and it's all not even close. So I think Bitcoin's going to grow. I think, not investment advice, I think in 10 years the price will be higher. um but Bitcoin is very limited. My personal view of Bitcoin is I think of Bitcoin as backup money.
Mm,
I think it's like the little bit of financial insurance that eventually everyone will want to have.
mm.
And by everyone, I mean governments, corporations, and individuals, because Bitcoin has unique properties that, in a pinch, if something goes terribly wrong, it will be more useful to you than any other kind of money. But there are reasons why you wouldn't want to put all of your money in Bitcoin. So that limits it. You're not going to use like Bitcoin for day-to-day transactions. I've always thought the hyper Bitcoinization thesis is very, very impractical.
Hmm.
Um, Now moving to the altcoins, I believe in ETH. I think ETH is close to that point of sustainability, that like permanently high plateau of just, it's decentralized, it's mature, it's useful. Um, it's either there or it's close to it. The problem, though, is that I don't feel that way about any other altcoin.
Okay.
I think the vast majority of other ones will go to zero eventually. That's not a critique of them necessarily. I'm deeply critical of some of them, if anybody follows me in social media or other places. But
Mhm.
people, when I say that, people are like, "Oh, so dude, you don't really believe in crypto." I'm like, well, the vast majority of new restaurants fail. That doesn't mean I don't
Right.
believe in restaurants. It's just the fact of life that it's very hard to overcome the initial adolescent years. And this is
Sure. Or
particularly,
just like venture capital, like tech venture
yeah,
capital.
yeah, great. Also in our world, because it is decentralized and permissionless and censorship resistant, these are buzzwords, but they mean anybody can try anything,
Yeah.
which means there's just going to be endless competition, which is great,
Right.
right? Like,
Right.
we don't have an endless competition for nationally issued currencies because there are only 180 something nations that can do that.
Open
But
source as well. Like
good point.
you
Yeah.
don't have some kind of proprietary edge, the code.
Right. So there's going to be amazing competition. I think there'll be eventually lots and lots and lots of very successful altcoins.
Mm.
I just don't know what they are.
Hmm. Yeah.
I do think, though, that on eventually the market value of all of the altcoins will be an order of magnitude bigger than Bitcoin. But again, that's not a knock on anything, right? Like, if I said 5 years ago, I think the sum of the values of all other stocks will be far more than Apple stock. People are like, yeah, of course, there's going to be many stocks. Like Apple
Right.
could be the most valuable company in the world, but um, I also think eventually all assets will move on chain, and some of these lines are going to get blurred. Um, but to summarize, Bitcoin is here to stay. I'm
Uh-huh.
confident of that, even though it might not be the biggest and the baddest forever. Um, I put a lot of value in that. So someone would have to give me 1.5 to 2 times more return to pick a altcoin basket. And by the way, if the altcoin basket didn't include ETH, I would just be like, forget about
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
it.
Right.
10x more than Bitcoin, because then it's just like the venture capital model.
For sure. So, you touched on it really briefly there. Do you think that like real world tokenized assets, is that, maybe one of the big places that crypto is going next?
Yes, I think eventually all assets will be tokenized,
Mm.
by which point we will just call them assets.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you a funny analogy for this is that since I was trading, like someone like Victor came up in the world of open outcry and manual, and he was never a
Where
pit
they're like,
trader, but
like making
yeah,
like the
the
symbols
hand
and
signals, yes, yes, which is
I
awesome.
don't
It's
know what
like
they are.
I don't know either, but if people actually, one of my friends who I met through Victor, he was a former floor trader. He created a book of some of these hand signals because he was like, "This is a dying language," and it is. It's a
Yeah.
language, but it's dying.
Right.
Um,
That's
but
interesting.
I came up. I only ever traded electronically. But you
Right.
would still
Me
occasionally have
too.
to call someone. But 20 years ago, there was this big debate about this. Like, what's better, right? Yeah, and there was like banks would have two different trading desks. It'd be like, oh, well, I'm on the FX desk. Oh, no, but I'm on the EFX desk
Right.
because it was just different client segments. It was technology, but it was just many other differences. Um, and now it's like, well, of course markets are electronic, right? I mean, they still have
Right.
like floors and exchanges, but you look at them and it's just dudes on an iPad standing there pushing buttons.
Yeah.
Um, so I think eventually the tokenized versus non-tokenized conversation will go. Oh, can I share an old trading story? It's one of
Please.
my favorite stories of all time. Um, I was at Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan with a couple of traders. Another guy who I met through Victor was a retired silver trader. He actually traded silver futures then at I think it was the old Comex pit, all the way in downtown Manhattan. He was retired, but he brought one of his friends who was a sugar trader. Like he actively traded sugar futures wherever they traded. I think again also at the Comex. Just you could imagine like a very large man from Brooklyn or Staten Island with just like imposing stature and wearing a lot of gold, and I get introduced and we're chatting and he's like, "Oh, so you trade," and he was older than me, obviously. He's like, "You trade electronically, like you trade on the computer." I'm like, "Yeah."
Uh-huh.
And then he says, "Well, like cursing is okay on this podcast?" I'm just checking.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm quoting someone, it's not me, but so he says, "So what happens if you ever make a mistake with a trade?" I'm like, "What do you mean? Like I put in the wrong price or the wrong amount?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, it goes through, the computer doesn't care. And then
Right.
as long as I have sufficient funds, like then what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, well, I have to reverse the trade and hopefully the market doesn't move against me in that time."
Right.
He says, "See, that's one of those things that I'll never understand. Because when I'm down on the pit and if I make a mistake on a trade, then I grab that fucking broker by his neck and I say, 'Hey, I'll buy you a steak. I'll buy you a beer. Whatever you do, don't put that trade in.' And you know what? He won't." And I was like, "All right, you got me there." That is electronic trading will never offer that feature.
Oh, that's
Uh,
amazing.
yeah, but it's just like a reflection of the cultural differences between generations when technology is concerned. Um, but I do think blockchain, as used for decentralized, permissionless crypto networks, is superior technology for owning and trading any kind of asset, whether
Yeah.
it's equities or real estate or bonds or derivatives or whatever. So I think eventually all RWA, real world assets, will move on to some kind of a blockchain infrastructure. And then they'll sit side by side with native crypto assets.
Hmm.
And they will, well, we already have this, right? In the world today, we have Bitcoin, we have ETH, and then we have stable coins.
Yeah.
And stable coins have some of the features of a cryptocurrency or a token. That's what makes them different than a bank account.
Yeah.
But they don't have all of them
Right.
because they're not fully decentralized. And that's fine.
Right.
It's still useful and it's still different.
Yeah. Everything has its pros and cons, right?
Yeah, and everything exists on a spectrum. Right? I think
Yeah.
you would appreciate this. Like, there's no such thing as the definition of decentralization.
Mm.
We can make a list of the attributes. So you mentioned like open source. Yeah, that's a good one.
Hmm.
And then a bunch of other ones. But everything's about trade-offs and how much how much decentralization you get as a user or an investor, and how much you need is very much dependent on the individual and the situation, right?
Yeah.
So there are lots of people who are perfectly happy owning a stablecoin like Tether, despite the questions that have always been around it, and despite the fact that it is public and known that they will censor certain addresses and wallets. And
Right.
I'm not even sure what kind of due process you get if some government goes and tells Tether to block your tokens.
Right.
But lots of people are happy to use Tether because it's still more decentralized than whatever other options they could have, which when it comes to access to dollars might be none at all. And I think this is going to be fascinating to watch of what's the equilibrium state where you have like the people that say, I'm going to hold Bitcoin for the reasons that I said earlier, that it's that kind of like world backup money. And then
Yeah.
other people say, actually, no, I'm just going to use this infrastructure for my country's native currency, which is not even all that great. But it's awesome that I can own it in a wallet and send it to anybody instantly and use it in DeFi. So I'm good with it.
Yeah. Like one of my recent guests was part of the Libertarian Party in Nevada, and he understands the appeal of Bitcoin, even though he's not like fully on board. But he was like, I don't see any reason why anybody would ever want Tether or stablecoin. I'm like, well, like there's $120 billion in Tether. Like somebody wants it.
I have a joke that almost any critique of anything in crypto makes perfect sense if you just add on the Upper West Side. So yes, like the Tether has no purpose on the Upper West Side.
Okay.
But if you live in a Latin American country that has both hyperinflation and capital controls,
Right.
right? Or like you only have $1,000, you're never going to get an American bank account,
Right.
but you would like to hold dollars, then Tether is a pretty darn useful solution for you.
What for those of us not very familiar with Manhattan, what's the Upper West Side?
Oh, it's like I just use Upper West Side because I teach at Columbia, which is like a little bit north of the Upper West Side. But yeah, it's a generic upper middle class neighborhood
Okay.
where the people who live there, and we should be grateful for this. I used to live there. I don't live there anymore, but you trust the money, like the dollar is fine, and you trust the legal system that backs that dollar if you have to go sue someone. You
Right.
generally trust your bank.
Right.
It's not like there's no risk, but you generally trust that your bank is not just gonna like forfeit your money because some politician told them to for no reason tomorrow, and you have the Bill of Rights and protections. And it drives me mad when people, and this is a word I almost never use because it's such a politically loaded term, but when people who live a life of privilege, as I do, don't
Right.
realize that for most human beings on Earth, that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, there's well over 1 billion people who do not have access to basic financial services as we
Yeah.
understand them. And if
Right.
you get down to the nitty-gritty of how all of that works, you realize that they never might, unless there's some kind of a radically different solution like crypto.
All right. Moving to our conclusion. Is there something that you wish I had asked you about, but I didn't?
No, I'm grateful that you didn't ask me to like predict the price of Bitcoin going forward or make me. You did. I liked your Bitcoin maxi test, but that wasn't
Okay.
really, that was more about the relative values.
Yeah.
And my students always want to talk about and ask me questions, and I'm not qualified. I don't know. And as a professor, it's not my job
Okay.
to like make price predictions, but then they get mad. I've even been booed in my own classroom. I once had a guest speaker who was a crypto investor, and one of the students said, "All right, the professor never talks about, but can you tell us what coin to buy?"
Right.
And the guy was about to say it. I was like, hold on, I'm sorry, not in this academic setting. And then all of my
Oh
students
no.
simultaneously, they were like, boo.
Oh no. Yeah. Well, as long as we're thinking about like, alternate titles and stuff, maybe the title of this channel could be the Bitcoin podcast that will not make you rich.
That's good, actually. That's really good.
All right. How can people connect with you, Omid? Or
If
Professor? Should I call you Professor Omid? Maybe
you
I've.
should, my students are the only people that need to call me professor, and only in the context of the classroom. But please call me Omid. Where can people find me? I post quick thoughts on Twitter. My handle is Malekan Ohms. That's my last name, Malekan, and then OMS. I have a blog on Medium. If you just go to, I have a website, omidmalekan.com. If you just go on there, there's my blog. I also occasionally write academic papers or like a op-ed for a magazine or something like that. Um, and it's all on there. And I'm also on LinkedIn, although I don't check it that often, just so people.
Yeah, and we'll have links to all that in the show notes. All
Thank you. And
right.
yes, and my books are available on Amazon. But like I said, there's specific times where they're good to read. Otherwise, all of the important knowledge for our world just exists on the day-to-day frontier.
Great. Well, I hope we can have you back on the show one day. Maybe we could focus especially on the trust book.
Sounds good. Would love to.
All right. So this is David Medley for Professor Omid Malekan and Proof of Pod. Thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, share, do all those things. I know there's a lot of you out there who are not subscribed. Get on it. Thank you very much again to my guest. This has been Proof of Pod, episode 11. See you next week.